on Petermarisburg 105.6 FM every Wednesday from 8 p.m. with Yunus Sacoor. That's 8 p.m. every Wednesday. Radio Al Ansar, keeping you informed.
خدا نے مجھ کو دیا تیری دعاؤں سے، تیری دعاؤں سے ملا ہے جو بھی ملا تیری دعاؤں سے، تیری دعاؤں سے، تیری دعاؤں سے جہاں جہاں بھی گیا دل چھانے لگے، جہاں جہاں بھی گیا دل چھانے لگے، یہ ہے تیرا میرا ماں تیری دعاؤں سے، تیری دعاؤں سے، تیری دعاؤں سے، تیری دعاؤں سے ماں کی دعا جنت کی دعا، 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 یہ کامیابیاں شوق قدم قدم پہ ملی، یہ کامیابیاں شوق قدم قدم پہ ملی، نصیب ایسا ملا ماں تیری دعاؤں سے، تیری دعاؤں سے ماں تیری دعاؤں سے، تیری دعاؤں سے طواف میں کیا طواف میں کیا جو میرا کیا ماں تیری دعاؤں سے، تیری دعاؤں سے ماں تیری دعاؤں سے، ماں تیری دعاؤں سے مجھے گرانے پہ حاسد تھے مگر مجھے گرانے پہ حاسد تھے مگر میں دشمنوں سے بچا ماں तेरी दुआ से तेरी दुआ से माँ तेरी दुआ से माँ तेरी दुआ से कसम है इसे में उजाले का कुछ कमाल नहीं कसम है इसे में उजाले का कुछ कमाल नहीं उरूज से को मिला माँ तेरी दुआ से तेरी दुआ से माँ तेरी दुआ से माँ तेरी दुआ माँ की दुआ जन्नत की माँ की दुआ जन्नत की की दुआ जन्नत की की दुआ जन्नत की
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to another edition of News in Focus live on Radio Al Ansar International, broadcasting on the frequency Durban 90.4 FM, Peter Marsburg 105.6 FM, and audio streaming on www.alansar.org.za. My name is Yunus Sacoor, and I will be in your company for the next 2 hours. I will be interviewing our guests shortly. Ahlan wa sahlan wa marhaba bikum. Today the date is the 5th of February 2025 and the 7th of Shaban 1446 AH. On tonight's show, we're going to do an analysis of the Expropriation Act and its implications. Once again, the role of rate play, civil society in improving service delivery. Are we really seeing any active role plays improving service delivery, or are we on a decline? And we're going to talk about some financial indicators, particularly the drop in the repo rate and implications. There's also, some other important aspects that seem to be breaking news. The DA flip-flops on the Expropriation Act, says it does not allow land seizure. And there are other issues relating to some of the utterances that US President Donald Trump has made regarding reconsidering, financial support to South Africa. So we got a host of issues we're going to discuss this evening. With me in the studio, I have Director of 6 Degree Shift, civic and community activist for the last 3 decades, Dr. Rama Naidu. He's been with us previously in the program. Mr. Councillor Asgar Khan from Jama. He's a councillor in one of the municipalities in the south. And later in the program, we'll be joined by Hassan Motala, the economist and asset manager. The show is interactive, and we welcome your comments, which can be sent to us on the studio WhatsApp number 060-904-1056. Now, in a few minutes' time, we will break for the Isha Azan. So before that, I thought, let me welcome Dr. Rama Naidu. Rama, welcome to News in Focus live on Radio Al Ansar International.
Thank you, Yunus. Always a pleasure to be here.
I know you had a busy week or weeks ahead, and you come from various meetings, but you always like to join us in Radio Al Ansar because we analyze the news that is in focus. And to me, the Expropriation Act is one of the areas that we need to look at. But Asgar, being a councillor and being on top of things in the municipality, we'll chat to him later about that particular aspect. But coming back to the issue of service delivery, that has been the subject of discussion in my program for many a month. And our community activists out there, the communities have been harping on the fact that there's been a gradual decline in service delivery to such an extent that we can question whether there is any service delivery in the various municipalities, or are the officials just sitting and doing nothing. Now, I know as a community activist, pre-apartheid era, we fought for democracy. We fought against the ills of the apartheid era. We fought various issues because the majority were left out from the normal stream of service delivery, and also, barred. And when we talk the Expropriation Act, we know the Group Areas Act, what damage it did. And whether we're reclaiming that land is another issue, but there's a big noise about the whole situation. But in terms of service delivery, we were hoping post-democracy and the 30 years into democracy that we will see an improvement, and that's not taking place. So just to set the scene, Rama, to our listeners out there, from your perspective, I know you've been chatting about this before, to what degree has service delivery declined? And let's not look 2 decades ago. We look in the last, say, 5 years, when, we had municipal elections, and we were hoping that the parties would, improve service delivery, particularly with the ANC, losing quite a lot of votes in the last provincial and national elections. How do you believe that it's declining quite significantly, and we got a serious problem ahead of us?
Well, I think, first of all, the decline is definitely not gradual. It's been increasing considerably over the last year. And it's not something that's just started now. We're harvesting what has happened over the last 2 or 3 terms of the ruling party, when they did not pay attention to infrastructure, aging infrastructure, and band-aiding things because of all the issues that we had with the government. But that's history now. But we're living with the consequences of that. So almost every day there's a water outage somewhere. And it's like, I know for a fact that the engineering department at that time had a clear plan of how that infrastructure was going to be updated systematically. But of course, when they tried to do the plan, there was no money. So that attempt at keep on postponing the notion of we'll get to it, now is what we're dealing with. So the reality is, and we can talk as much as we want to talk about it, and you can speak about this, the city doesn't have the money to fix this thing up. That's just a fact. So we can scream and shout and do whatever you want to do. The backlog in infrastructure, forget about our areas, in the underdeveloped areas, 10 times worse than what we have. So people are all screaming, but it's time that we said, okay, this is the reality. And even for the ruling party to take responsibility for what happened. We all make mistakes, right? The starting point of building something new is admitting that we messed up. But if you keep denying that and trying to find other reasons for it, whether it's another party or whatever else you can talk about, then we keep on bluffing ourselves that, we're getting somewhere, even with our movements, activities, and protest actions. But in fact, we're standing still. We have been standing still for quite a while, and civil society is as stuck as anyone else in the process. So even though we have a government of national unity, and they're battling with their own things, I think it was an amazing opportunity to reignite the notion of true civic activism. And that was not about the old way of saying, let's take to the streets. Protest on its own without action is useless. It's how do we start to talk about things like legislative changes? How do we make our war rooms much more effective than they are right now? Because most are completely ineffective in these spaces. The right people don't turn up in the rooms. They send delegates. I mean, I hear about this all the time. It's actually quite shameful when it happens.
Some are sending junior staff out there who don't have the mandate to come and talk.
So what's the point of having a war room that means where you meet people and talk about the real issues in your ward? And all you have
there's
is
no action plan or there's no finances. I think, Rama, you set the scene for exactly what's happening. Finances have been drained. The people that are working, they may not be qualified for the job. Corruption and maladministration has caused such a major problem that we're going to find it difficult to get around it. Civil society is making noise, ratepayer associations are making noise, but all those people are doing is sending junior officials, listening to them, and nothing is being done. On that note, what we'll do is, Asgar, I'll bring you in after the Isha Azan. We'll take a break for the Isha Azan, and inshallah we'll continue after that.
Would you like to give Sadaqah 365 days a year? You can with the Al Imdad Foundation's Daily Sadaqah program. Donate as little as R1 a day for a month for each member of your family, up to any specified amount, and receive monthly feedback on where your contributions have made a difference. Visit alimdad.com and download your Daily Sadaqah debit order form or call 0861 786 243 for more information.
This Azan is sponsored for the Isale Sawab of Marhum Muhammad Farooq Latib and all Marhumin. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant them the highest abode in Jannah. Ameen.
أعزائي المستمعين، حان الآن موعد أذان العشاء لمدينة دربن وما حولها.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
اللهم رب هذه الدعوة التامة والصلاة القائمة آت محمدا الوسيلة والفضيلة والدرجة الرفيعة وابعثه مقاما محمودا الذي وعدته وارزقنا شفاعته يوم القيامة إنك لا تخلف الميعاد.
This dua brought to you by Simplex Radio, South Africa's leading retailer of appliances, car sound and home theater systems.
These surahs after Azan are brought to you by Amina's Wonder Spice and Wonder Dates, 9 Peters Road, Springfield, Dub.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل أعوذ برب الفلق من شر ما خلق ومن شر غاسق إذا وقب ومن شر النفاثات في العقد ومن شر حاسد إذا حسد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل أعوذ برب الناس ملك الناس إله الناس من شر الوسواس الخناس الذي يوسوس في صدور الناس من الجنة والناس.
This salah is proudly brought to you by Khan's Chemical Industry. May this salah enlighten your soul and bring about endless blessings throughout your day. This salah was proudly brought to you by Khan's Chemical Industry. May this salah enlighten your soul and bring about endless blessings throughout your day.
Having a clean, comfortable home is every homeowner's pride. That's why Khan's Chemicals have developed and manufactured prime yet affordable quality household brands. Starlight, Miracle Mum, Exterminate, and Angie to care for your home and family. With a wide range of fabric softeners, dishwashing liquids, bleachers, and all-purpose cleaners, pine gels, bubble baths, and much more, Khan's Chemicals ensures your home remains our #1 priority. For sales and other inquiries, call 011 933 4021. Khan's Chemicals, cleaning your home the way you want.
Durban's #1 truck stop, Reef Trade, situated at number 9 Joyner Road, Prospecton, offering a 24-hour parking facility on site with diesel wholesale and mobile distribution for vehicles, generators, plant and machinery to your door, safe parking, truck wash, container handling, restroom facilities, and more. Call us on 083 449 1563 or 083 978 6410 for a free quotation. Reef Trade, we're here for you.
Audio stream across the world on radioalansar.co.za.
Taught us all about love, showed us what it means. No radiance, just
إني مشتاق لأحبابي من بعد
فما يرضيك حبيبي محمد أنت من صلى عليك وسلم أمتي أدخلها معي أمتي في الجنة نلتقي يا محمد يا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم يا محمد يا محمد بعينك قلبي تبسم يا محمد يا محمد so radiant يا محمد محمد just take my soul صلى الله عليه وسلم يا محمد يا محمد يا مالك قلبي تبسم يا محمد يا محمد so radiant يا محمد يا محمد to see Christ.
Radio Al-Ansar, Durban, 90.4 FM, Peter Maritzburg, 105.6 FM.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to News in Focus live on Radio Al-Ansar International, broadcasting in the frequency Durban 90.4 FM, Peter Maritzburg 105.6 FM, on streaming on www.alansar.org.za. Before the news break, we had a chat with Dr. Rama Naidu, and we were briefly talking about the state of service delivery post-apartheid. And Rama briefly mentioned that there are so many challenges on infrastructure, upgrading and maintenance. The question is there enough funding? Do civic activists, ratepayer associations have any say in improving service delivery? There's a question mark. Now, Rama, I want to bring you back. Historically, we discussed off air that when plans are formulated for the different wards for a particular year for service delivery, there's an IDP document that's prepared, and this is done in consultation with the ward councillors and the communities from the different wards with the view to prioritizing service delivery in those areas. Now, you mentioned that in order to prioritize that, you must have a budget. And if that budget is wasted on everything else other than service delivery, then you have the challenges that you're talking about. Now, I know a couple of years ago, the national and provincial department imposed on municipalities what we call back to basics. In other words, they indicated to the municipalities that identify the problem areas of service delivery, get your budgets allocated, and go back to basics and ensure the service delivery takes place. For example, in a particular ward, if the roads are in a bad state, there's too many potholes, the roads require rehabilitation, and there's too many other areas where there's sewer blockages, stormwater blockages, then prioritize those, and in your budget allocate those funds so that those departments can go in and start dealing with those challenges. But because of maladministration, the scourge of corruption, incompetent officials being in the municipalities, which we're harping for many, many months, there are challenges. Now, when ratepayer associations, as you mentioned, or civil society goes to the war room or approaches the councillor says, we're going to try. But when they go to Exco or they go to the council meetings, the portfolio committee meetings, the reply is there's no funding. Now, how are we going to really go back to basics and begin to see improvement in service delivery? Because people are paying rates, they're paying the utility charges, but in return, they're not getting the services they require. And that has been the sore point for many, many organizations. And when they talk about it and want to withhold rates, then legislation holds them back. Rama?
I think the situation is forcing us into making serious decisions about collaboration and confrontation. For a long time, let's get together and talk. But at some point, you have to hold people accountable. You have to tell them the tough truth of what is there. And what we're getting right now is because we don't have transparency about things like budgets, dates, time periods, we inadvertently make up stories that might not be true. So before we say that, they haven't done their work, the question for us is, how do we start to make all these many institutions, organized war rooms, IDP programs? In fact, I think we have the most transparent constitution in the whole world, most democratic on paper about public participation. The reality is that system has been co-opted by politicians. And let's be clear, the co-option didn't happen on their own. We also opted out and let people do what they wanted to do. because we were not vigilant in what happened. And now we pay the price of it. So it's easy to blame what happened. The question to ask is, in the last 30 years, where were we in that time? Were we just saying, no, democracy is here, let's sit back and wait? And of course, that was licensed to say, do what you want to do. And that's always the danger of democracy. So now the situation has come up where we see increasingly in this country, those who can afford it have simply privatized their service. Right? The big estates are the cities completely self-sufficient on their own. So they don't care. They can afford not pay and not worry about it. It will affect middle-class citizens and the lower-class citizens who don't have that option and have garbage on the streets and no voice for it. And that constituency has zero agency in terms of accessing even what is happening. We're talking just now about the notion that there are things happening in the city, but as citizens, yes, maybe we're not interested, but it's also a responsibility of the city to make that information available to us in a format that ordinary people can begin to understand. You have 10 roads, that's the budget, this is when it will happen. Forget all the jargon. And then that means I can meet you face to face and I can see what is happening. So I'm willing to wait if I know there's a plan and there are more important things. But when I don't know the plan, when I keep getting told, you got a plan, but there's no money, this resentment is going to build, and which is happening right now, to the point where there'll be a complete breakdown. And we're heading for that situation extremely quickly in the city because we're not getting the response that we want to say, for goodness sake, come please and tell us, invite us to a session where we come sit down and say, this is our real issue right now. Forget about the history. That is history. We are in the present moment. The question is, what can we do about it? And is there space for us to find something really creative and innovative to sort the backlog? And when I say innovative, I'm talking about things like saying public-private partnerships. There are hundreds of companies who do tar work, fix up roads, and they don't have work. Come together and say, listen, what is your budget for this work? Give us a plan of how it will happen. We start to employ people, create something in the economy, but we're not even beginning to talk about those things. So in that space, it's a stalemate. We're just sitting here and we can have these debates and talk about it and try to represent what's happening. But if the answer is there's no money, now what? What are you fighting for? The sound of your own voice.
Associations are raising these issues with the municipality. There are promises maybe being made, but to no avail. Asgar, I want to bring you in. Welcome to News in Focus live on Radio Al Ansar International.
Assalamu alaikum and assalamu alaikum to your listeners. Shukran for having us.
Okay, Asgar, being a counselor, for the last, I don't know how long, maybe it's over a year, Rama as a community activist is straight to the point. He's saying that all the municipalities, there's a major problem. Service delivery has been compromised, and you go to Kwaduguza or you go to Msunduzi or eThekwini or any of these municipalities, some maybe there is some improvement, but others there's been not a gradual decline but a serious decline. After we were chatting about the IDP, it's a planning process, and the purpose of the IDP was to prioritize the emergency or urgent service deliverables, and if that process was followed together with the budget, there would have been, some degree of service delivery. We're not saying they would sort every area out in 1 year, but if there's a plan, there's a process of dealing with service delivery, and communities will see some impact in their areas. There's various deliverables people are looking for, but the key deliverables like water, electricity, the outages that are taking place. Thank Almighty that at least load shedding this came for 1 day and it stopped again. I think they hit a miss or whatever. But at the end of the day, forget about those people that are living in informal settlements. The situation is really bleak for them. Because for the last 3 decades, they just stuck there living in those hills and in terrible conditions. And they've been made promises but hardly being kept. But those that are paying rates and paying for utilities are not getting any value for money. And if they try to withhold those payments, then they dealt a blow. So from your perspective, being a new councillor and also from the South Coast, one of the smaller municipalities, are you sort of facing the same problem in the different areas, and is it same as other areas, or do you see that that municipality is a bit more responsible, the one that you are a councillor in?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I think just for the record, I've been a councillor. This is the 9th year now. This is my second term. I'm a councillor from 2016, representing Al Jama in the Amdoni municipality, which is South Coast.
So you're quite experienced councillor.
So I think that the issues and the challenges that are being raised are not specific to the Etigweni municipality. I think many municipalities throughout KwaZulu-Natal and indeed the country, when you go to conferences and you go to gatherings where you find councillors from around the country, the challenges that we experience in our small towns or in our cities here in KZN are the same challenges that are experienced throughout the country. But I think it comes down, we touched on the issue of the IDP. The IDP, depends how we look at it, can also be looked at as a shopping list. Every ward wants a jungle gym and a playground, and they want infrastructure upgrades, and they want the roads to be sorted out. But we must cut our suit according to our cloth. So it's important to identify the process that takes place, and then also what is very important that municipalities need to be very. I always tell and I always say this to the councillors and to the officials that are preparing the budget, that they must be cognizant of the 7 Ps. Proper prior planning prevents poor, pathetic performance. So the planning stage starts well before the implementation of the budget come July 1st. So the planning will already have started in November, December in the IDP process plan. And you'll be going towards the adoption of the IDP. So just for the sake, and I think because it's a civil society is here and people from the community are listening, it's important that they understand the process that goes in to preparing the budget that will be adopted at the end of May and implemented from July. So what happens is when the council goes into a term, so 2021, the council will have then identified priorities by May 2022. Identify the priorities for the 5-year period, that in this 5 years we want to do so many kilometers of roads, we want to build so many new halls, we want to build playgrounds in these areas. So whatever the need is of the society, they would then identify it for a 5-year period, and it's revisited on an annual basis when the budget is then implemented. So from around October, November, you'll find that the mayors in the different municipalities around KZN will go and visit communities, and then they call it road shows or budget road shows and all those type of things. So to some of us, we see it's a waste of money because it comes at a great cost, hiring of venues, providing meals, but it's a way of engaging with the community. One, to sort of account for what has taken place in the past year, and to give hope for the next year. These are the priorities for within your ward or within the cluster. So then the mayor and the councillors will go out to these areas, identify the needs. They will come back. They will have IDP rep forums. So these forums are made up of business sector, the war rooms, the different departments that work within the municipality. You'll also find the ward councillors office and the ward councillors ward committee will make up these forums. And what will then happen is that then a charter of the immediate needs of this municipality will then be drawn up for the next year. And then the CFO and the budget steering committee. In government, we always have committees and talk shops and workshops and all those type of things. But the budget steering committee will then look at what is the projected income for the next year. You'll find in February, the Minister of Finance will announce the budget for the national budget. And in that budget, there's what we call the equitable share, or the DORA, Division of Revenue Act. So he announced that, and so each municipality will then have an understanding of what funding we're getting in from the national government. Now, and I like the point Uncle Yunus mentioned, that we as ratepayers, we need to get value for money. But how then does the municipality provide services to areas where they're not ratepayers? Although SPLUMA and the Municipal Property Rates Act legislates that every property must be rated, but we know on the ground it's not a reality. Spluma indicates that it's wall to wall municipality, so there's no place in the province or in the country that doesn't belong to a municipality, and that municipality has the right to charge rates. But we understand that the dynamics of the country, where we are coming from, we have rural areas where there's no rates being levied. So in those areas, we'll find that the Division of Revenue Act, DORA equitable share, comes in to cover those services that are provided in those areas. So rates, although we don't like it, and I for one, I always say that the taxes is an oppression upon the people, especially in this country. We are highly taxed. So when we pay our rates, we obviously want something in return, but we also need to be there at the table, influencing the decisions that are taken through your ward committees, through your ward councillor, through your IDP rep forums, through civil society actions like doctor sitting next to me, that we need to engage and make sure that the decisions that are taken in council benefits the community. And I think that's where we need to start. So the planning process is very important.
Thanks for just giving us an overview of how the municipalities should work. Rama, I want to bring you in again. We know that this Expropriation Act has been promulgated, and it's a huge challenge. Later on, we're going to talk about it. I know you need to leave soon because you had a heavy day, and I want you to, comment further on how do we fix up this problem. You briefly mentioned that, back to basics is one area, but the scourge has been so bad that it's challenging whether we will really have service delivery improving in municipalities unless there's a complete rehash of personnel and councillors. Everybody's talking about 2026, and we're planning to mobilize ratepayer associations and civil society towards ensuring that you got your right councillor to be elected in those areas, because if the councillor is active in that particular ward, and he or she identifies the deliverables and make up a big noise at the municipality and demand services, then at least there's some action being taken on behalf of the ward. So we all know that service delivery is at an all-time low. It's getting bad to worse, and it's cause for concern because ratepayers are fed up and they just simply lifting their hands up and saying, we're getting nowhere with this municipality. And it also now, goes up to the province and national legislature, because tomorrow, President Ramaphosa is going to have his State of the Nation address, and he's got some huge challenges in terms of water outages, electricity outages. He's got other problems to look at, the utterances that Donald Trump has been making about withholding aid to South Africa and talking about the Expropriation Act becoming a huge problem. And then on top of it is he needs to justify that the GNU is effective, because there are bickerings going on with the various parties, although everybody is now backing out. But then you're having utterances from people like Julius Malema saying that, who said we're not going to join in if the DA moves out? MK is keeping quiet, but I believe Zuma is going to attend the State of the Nation address. So he's waiting to say, I'm going to come back home. So the situation of the GNU is an area of concern, and there's a whole lot of other concerns that are going on. So do you really see, with the kind of bickerings that are going on all over, that municipalities are now going to get back to action and say, we're going to do something about it?
I think you touched briefly on the point about 2026 local government elections. And I think the time has come when we realized, and I've been to many of these ratepayers meetings, and I tell you, if you take the name out, the same issues come up every single time, the same screaming and ranting and raving. And my point is always, I'm not very popular when I say it. I said, you can stand here and scream and rant and rave, and you've been doing this for years. Has anything changed? And they say no. And I said, well, obviously what you're doing is not working. We need something else, right? Now, the next local government elections, in the view of what's happened politically at the national level, is the only window that we have to regain ground that we've lost in this country. Because for ordinary people, national government is a circus. It's too far away from us. But your local councillor, your ward councillor, your actual councillor, the forums that are there, those things have not been populated by people, because we can rant and rave, but we ask the same people, okay, Who here will volunteer to go and sit in at a council meeting and give us a report back? I won't do that. It's easy to stand on the sidelines and shout. But to get the work done, you have to roll up your sleeves and stand up and say, well, I'm going to do this. And it's not that we don't have competent people. We have very competent people who can do it. But we haven't got the passion. We become too cynical about the situation. And so we become a nation of mourners. Not that it's unwarranted, but the mourning is not enough. So the window for the 26, that election, and you saw for the last election, we had a flurry of strange people all running for government. And I told many of them, why even thinking about national? Small parties. This is your time to get into areas where people know who you are and let's regain confidence at that interface. Because when we do that, and those councillors know what they're doing, and we can hold them accountable, that changes the story. Because right now, the dysfunction between most councillors and the people is vast. And we've been whitewashed, and partly our own fault because we don't have the right data. We don't make the effort to get the right data because we have a legal right to get the data. And then challenge them in a way which is not just confrontational for the sake of confrontation. It's confrontational for the sake of the benefit of this country and our people. So we should be fighting on the same side, right? But it's always this notion of them and us, and that gets us nowhere. So I think the window for the local government elections is probably the one moment in history where civil society can step into the space and start working on things that are very practical, identifying leaders of a high caliber, who have integrity, who have some skills that are necessary. It's not enough to say, I represent the people. You know how to attend a council meeting and stand up and say something of substance. Otherwise, what is the point? So we have to arm our leaders with the right knowledge and skills to do the work, so they feel competent when they get into these spaces. And when they speak then, with knowledge and information, you cannot ignore them anymore. But the ranting and raving, you can easily ignore. There he goes again. There's no substance. So I want to throw it on the gauntlet and say to those civil society activists who stood for elections the last year and got hurt quite badly, and I expected nothing less. If you have a following and you're really passionate about your community, start to arm yourselves, not with guns and weapons, but with knowledge, information. Go into these spaces because they're open spaces, right? And re-galvanize it. I think we lost something in 1993, and we've become very complacent. So right now, the center is not holding. If you ask for the civil society coalition, there is no coalition. They're just some organization which claim to speak for civil society. So I think there's a lot of work to get done. And I know there's some initiatives, even which Radio Al-Azhar is involved, to try and mobilize this again across all the lines of difference that we normally come up with, whether it's religion, caste, or area, to say, if someone does not start it, who will? So when you start something like this, you'll always get people say, yeah, what's your agenda? What are you doing? Who are you? Is this another a Muslim thing? Is it an overpot thing? And my point is this: if someone has the courage to start it, don't shoot them down. Don't shoot them down because you haven't started anything. And that's a place to start working from and say, well, someone is standing up and calling us to order. Let's at least get into these spaces and start doing the work. And that is the work.
I want to mention, Rama, some very interesting happening that took place in the last election. No matter what we say about Jacob Zuma, the former president, he realized he was getting nowhere with his political battles. And the reality is that he had to do something about it. And he had his followers with him. Rightfully or wrongfully, he said that the only space I can take is to form a new party and to start mobilizing to get support. And check what he achieved. And he shocked everybody because what space they took in KZN was 43% of the province vote and 15% of the national vote, which tantamounted to millions of votes. What you're alluding to, Rama, is go back to basics in your voting structures to mobilize your communities towards identifying the correct leader per ward. And you may end off with, of the 110 ward seats, even if it's 10 or 15 or 20 as opposed to 3 or 4 that you have now, And those councillors will have a voice in the municipality because they'll be kingmakers, so that they will represent those wards, as Asgar mentioned, to say these are our priorities, and they will be heard. Because at the moment, you have 3 or 4 councillors that are coming from these wards, and they just like, being tossed around to say that, listen, we'll give you something, but the majority are in a particular political party. But now the terrain has now changed in the bigger municipalities because there are a whole lot of different political players. But what we're saying is in municipal elections, it's different from provincial and national, where you work on a ward and even an independent can get in. So now is the time to mobilize, and ratepayers must not be afraid for folding up their sleeves and making the effort. Now, I think Rama mentioned that, there is a process that's commencing, and it's a progressive process to give support to the ratepayer associations in those different wards to start mobilizing it. And how do you mobilize? And Asgar will talk about it later in the program, is that you need to establish who are the potential voters in that particular ward. And the way political parties have designed the wards is they made sure that there's a nice mix of informal settlements in many of these wards, so those guys will bring the strength of that particular political party. Now, as a ratepayer association, you need to establish that how you're going to get your leader in, because he may be the best guy for that particular ward. And if you had to align to a political party because they got the strength of the balance of power in that ward, you've got to be smart enough to organize yourselves with that political party. So the engagement starts now, about a year and a half before that election takes place. Asgar, I want to bring you in quickly before the news break. Just a 2-minute. Is it the right time to start preparing and mobilizing ratepayer associations in those wards in preparation for municipal elections 2026?
My standard answer to how do we win elections? Elections is not won the month before the elections.
Correct.
Or 2 months before the elections.
Correct.
Elections is won in the 5 years between the elections.
Correct.
So I think we're 2 years already behind.
Yes.
We need to start pushing ratepayers associations. I'm not canvassing on your show, Uncle Yunus, but I'm making it known to the ratepayers association that our organization is open to welcoming them and ensuring that we'll give you all the support that you need, all the training that you need to go into council and make it happen for the communities. You, at the end of the day, know what the challenges are within your communities. Don't expect someone else to represent you. Go represent yourself.
Rama, I know you need to leave, and you're a very difficult person to get to, but a very accommodating individual. Your closing comments, Rama, before you leave. What's your advice? You made some very pertinent points, and to me, that's a start of a revolution in local government.
I think the point is that every citizen in this country is at a crossroads. It's very simple. Are you going to continue to just sit here and wait until things get so bad that you withdraw, if you can afford it, not do it? Or are you going to say enough? You have many competent leaders in the community who are not interested in politics. So then we get what we deserve, right? People have no knowledge, no skills, and they represent you. So to those leaders who have skills, it's time to stand up for yourself, for your community, for your country, and say, listen, I'm available. These are my qualifications. Give me a chance. And if you know who these people are, back them up, train them properly for the work. That voice cannot be ignored when they go to council, and people will be scared because they can quote law, they can shut you up legally because they know those things. But if you don't have that data, it's very easy to shut you down.
Correct.
So it's just a time to say that stop the moaning and groaning and ask yourself one simple question. Is there something I could do? Is there someone I know who could be a leader like that? Go to your ratepayers meeting, just to the one, and see what's happening there. Offer your help and support if you have a skill, because we need that support. There's no money in this thing. So that's a challenge for us. And that means roll up your sleeves and say, I'm coming. I want to do some work. And I think we become too cynical about politics. But as you said, we cannot exist without politics. We have to form alliances that work for us, that are strategic for us to achieve what we want. And that means we do things sometimes where we have to compromise. But the end result is the people in your ward benefit from your presence on council.
Well said, Rama. And, we'll have to do a Jacob Zuma come 2026.
I look forward to that.
On that note, we'll have a break for news, and we'll continue after the news break.
Great.
An informative Islamic global perspective. This is Al Ansar News.
Making news this hour, the 5th of February, the news from Durban 90.4 FM, Pietermaritzburg 105.6 FM. KwaZulu-Natal ratepayers want President Ramaphosa to address service delivery. American Monina. KwaZulu-Natal ratepayers say the key issues they want President Ramaphosa to address during the State of the Nation address SONA tomorrow is service delivery. Ramaphosa will deliver his first State of the Nation address under the Government of National Unity. The president is expected to reflect on some of the challenges faced by his administration and outline plans for the year ahead. J. Lavi Govender of the Otongati Ratepayers Association says that infrastructure in the area is not properly maintained. Ish Pralad of the Etegwini Ratepayers and Residents Association says they need a stable supply of water. In more news, the Orient Islamic School is heading to Abu Dhabi to contest the Manchester City Cup. Reporters, the Orient Islamic School and yet another school in Johannesburg will be representing South Africa. Abdurrahim Haidal, head of sports at the school, had this to say.
I think it's a great honor for us to be taking a team to represent firstly the country, our country, South Africa, in such a prestigious tournament, an international tournament in which there's going to be more than 22 different countries competing. And I think it's showing our community and our learners that here at Orient Islamic School, we make dreams come true. You know, learners coming into development soccer from a very, very young age dream to be playing in such an environment, and a professional environment in which they get to travel and represent their school and their country. And we are confident that this team, who has done exceptionally well last year in the regional tournaments and the national tournaments that they participated in, they did exceptionally well, and we are quite confident that this team will make the community, our community of KZN, will make our Orient Islamic School community and will make our South Africa proud in this international tournament. Well, let me just highlight that this is probably the first international sporting tour of Orient Islamic School.
More news now. The bodies of 14 South African soldiers who were killed in the Democratic Republic of Congo have been repatriated today. The peacekeepers who were part of the SADC and United Nations mission deployment lost their lives during clashes in the eastern DRC last month as an armed group, the M23, advanced towards the city of Goma. The South African National Defense Force has confirmed that the process of bringing their remains home begins today. Meanwhile, the SANDF chief Rudzani Mapwaya defended the troops while addressing Parliament's Joint Committee on Defense yesterday. He said their deaths were not caused by a lack of training, but as a result of indirect fire. Meanwhile, EFF Member of Parliament Carl Niall says President Ramaphosa and the SANDF chief are misleading the country, saying the authorities knew they were sending the young men to die. Here, international story, a major breakthrough in the fight for justice for Palestinians. The Brussels Parliament has passed a resolution to formally recognize the acts committed by Israeli military in Gaza as genocide and now calling for sanctions against the Israeli regime. The March 30 movement, which has long advocated for Palestinian cause, stated that the historic step was adopted on the 3rd of February. This comes as the movement's electoral initiative during the 2024 campaign, Viva Palestina, focused on one key demand, which is for the Brussels Parliament to officially recognize the genocide in Gaza and take concrete action. Reports says throughout the campaign, Viva Palestina engaged extensively in debates with the political parties, applied pressure to push them to take a stance and mobilize public opinion. With the resolution adopted at the Commission level, the March 30 movement urges all Belgian parties to vote in its favor at a plenary session, ensuring that Brussels continue to lead by example in the fight for justice and human rights. Your financial indicators ran to the dollar 18 rands 58, the euro 19 rands 36, and the British pound is 23 rands 29 cents. In your weather, it's 29 degrees. A quick reminder of our top story. KwaZulu-Natal ratepayers say the key issues they want President Ramaphosa to address tomorrow at the SONA, the State of the Nation address, is service delivery. That's
You've spent all that time, effort, and energy putting together an incredible business. Now, you need to tell people about your business. Advertising and marketing, it's what we do. Listen to this.
Absolutely amazing. It's been my first experience working with a radio station. So you don't actually know what to expect. And you also feel like, you're just going to be a number. But at Radio Al Ansar, I was just not a number. I think the support that we've got has been amazing. You guys have been absolutely amazing. You guys have opened doors for us that a couple of months ago, I wouldn't have thought possible. I think the support for me has been the greatest. It's so widespread because you guys are on YouTube Live, Facebook Live, not just radio based. We've got people in Johannesburg listening to you guys. So it's so widespread. We're getting that marketing.
Get in touch with our sales department on 031 208 1601. Speak directly to your target audience.
This segment is brought to you by Kenfield Auto, your RMI approved service and repair specialist. 236 Brickfield Road, Overport. Kenfield Auto.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ربنا اغفر لي ولوالدي وللمؤمنين يوم يقوم الحساب.
Car won't start?
Kenfield Auto.
Noisy brakes?
Kenfield Auto.
Due for a service?
Kenfield Auto. Kenfield Auto. The answer to all your car problems. Your service and repair specialist for your VW, Audi, Suzuki, Toyota, or just about any vehicle. Kenfield Auto, your RMI and insurance approved workshop to handle them all. 236 Brickfield Road, Overport. Call us on 031 207 2399. Kenfield Auto.
Aman means safety. The Aman School of Excellence in Finetown, South Africa, is securing the futures of underprivileged children by providing world-class education in a safe and nurturing environment. Sponsor a child for only 15,000 Rand per year or any amount. A quality education at Aman presents a pathway out of poverty and a brighter future for South Africa. Africa Muslims Agency. Empowering, educating, inspiring.
Get ready for an exciting shopping and dining experience. The Islam Alive Pre-Ramadan Fair is back. Join us on February the 7th to the 9th at the David Lander Hall, 5 Crocus Road, Asheville, from 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. Don't miss out on the Ramadan experience. Call us on 083 628 5801 or 082 757 3535. Islam Alive Pre-Ramadan Fair, where shopping and community come together.
Welcome to Simplex Radio. Visit our showroom for the full range of car audio. Our TV department carries top brands with quality LED panels, full HD to Ultra HD, and now the experience of Super Ultra HD. Visit our theater rooms and transform your home with brands like Onkyo, Integra, Denon, Boston Acoustics, Yamaha, and more for quality audio visual experience. Now available full range of home appliances. A one-stop shopping experience. Call 031 306 4029 or Kenilworth Park, 202 Brickfield Road, Overport. Simplex Radio, the name you can trust.
Relax, relieve, repair. Say goodbye to tired joints and muscles with Arnica Blue Magnesium Spray. Now available in 3 options: soothing heat spray, refreshing cooling gel, and rejuvenating massage oil, all enriched with Arnica and added magnesium for powerful relief. Find your comfort today at your local pharmacy or shop online at www.czmarketing.co.za. Arnica Blue, your partner in recovery.
Audio stream across the world on radioalansar.co.za.
أرسلناك إلا رحمة للعالمين, and we have not sent you, O Muhammad, except as a mercy to the world. उठो बेसहारो चलो गम के मारो खबर ये सुनाओ हुजूर आ गए हुजूर आ गए
हुसूरा गए हुसूरा गए हुसूरा गए हुसूरा गए हुसूरा गए हुसूरा गए हुसूरा गए
अनोखा निराला वो ज़ीशान आया वो सारे रसूलों के सुल्तान आया सुल्तान आया अरे बादशाह हो खुदा हो निगाहें झुकाओ हुजूर आ गए
हुसूरा गए हुसूरा गए हुसूरा गए हुसूरा गए हुसूरा गए हुसूरा गए हुसूरा गए हुसूरा गए
हुआ चार सूर है मैं तो काब से उजाला उजाला सवेरा 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 हलीमा को पहुंची खबर आमिना की मेरे घर में आओ हुजूर आ गए हैं
हुसूरा गए 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 हुसूरा गए
Abundant salutations upon Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, who lives in the hearts of billions.
Listen to News in Focus on Radio Al-Ansar, Durban 90.4 and Petermarisburg 105.6 FM every Wednesday from 8 p.m. with Yunus Sacoor. That's 8 p.m. every Wednesday, Radio Al-Ansar, keeping you informed.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to News in Focus live on Radio Al-Ansar International, broadcasting on the frequency Durban 90.4 FM, Petermarisburg 105.6 FM, and streaming on www.alansar.org.za. Before the news break, we were chatting on the role of rate-pay civil society in improving service delivery. This is an ongoing subject, and Dr. Rama Naidu terminated his discussion on the basis that civil society needs to mobilize for the 2026 elections, starting, from a few years ago, as pointed out by Councillor Asgar Khan. But if you haven't, you have a year and a half left. Please mobilize, get your act together, and try to become part of the process of becoming a councillor in the 110 wards that are available in eThekwini and indeed other municipalities. So tomorrow, President Ramaphosa will be chatting in Sona, and the question is Ramaphosa Sona dilemma. Now, ministers' corruption scandals and no consequences, that is an area that people are looking at. President Cyril Ramaphosa may face difficulty in convincing the public that there is consequence management within his cabinet following corruption scandals involving ministers Thembi Simelane and Kumbuso and Shaveni, according to political analysts, ahead of Ramaphosa's Sona delivery in Cape Town, where he will outline the priorities of the Government of National Unity for the first time under his leadership as the leader of a coalition government. The GNU was formed after the ANC's electoral defeat during the last year's general election. This marked for the first time in South African democracy history. The ANC will not govern alone at the national level, forming coalition government with parties such as DA, Patriotic Alliance, IFP, Good Party, Pan-African Congress of Azania, Freedom Front Plus, United Democratic Movement, and Al-Jama and Rise in Sanzi. So, Asgar, your party is part of the GNU. In his opening of Parliament last year in July, Ramaphosa outlined 7 priorities for the 7th administration, including combating crime, which is still rife, addressing youth unemployment, which is still a problem, improving education, which is still a problem, Ending load shedding, well, we've sort of had a lot of ending of load shedding, but we had one this weekend, which was a short stint and ended. Fostering economic growth and implementing the National Health Insurance Bill. So a lot of these things are still outstanding. But very important is Ramaphosa has now been called to deal with the electricity and water crisis. Now, he has been urged to prioritize electricity, water, and sanitation challenges in the country when he delivers that Sona speech tomorrow. Now, civil society organizations, which we have been talking about, said water and electricity remain in need in every household in the country, and they are expecting Ramaphosa to reveal initiatives to prioritize these basic essentials. Civic Movement Save South Africa said it was a human rights catastrophe that to date many poor or marginalized citizens still find themselves in a position where water is not drinkable because of cadre deployment in key sectors of the economy. Now, we're discussing about cadre deployment and the lack of, sort of efficient officials in the various departments, and that's been our subject for many a week. And we deliberated on that a short while ago. But, we have to understand that what has now hit us is the signing of the Expropriation Act and its implications. Now, South Africa is a constitutional democracy that is deeply rooted in the rule of law, justice, and equality. The South African government has not confiscated any land. Now, many critics are concerned about the Expropriation Act, but, comparable to the Group Areas Act, there's vast differences. The recently adopted expropriation is not a confiscation instrument, but a constitutionally mandated legal progress that ensures public access to land in an equitable and just manner as guided by the Constitution. South Africa, like United States of America and other countries, has always had expropriation laws that balance the need for public usage of land and the protection of the rights of property owners. So now I know Trump had something to say about this, and obviously he indicated clearly that, he's worried. Now, the DA flip-flops on the Expropriation Act, says it does not allow land seizure. The Democratic Alliance has called on U.S. President Donald Trump's administration to reconsider threats to cut critical aid funding in response to the Expropriation Act, saying that it is not true that the act allows land to be seized by the state arbitrarily. In a tweet, Trump said that he would stop providing funding aid to South Africa because he was worried that the newly passed act would lead to land seizure. He further went on to say that certain class of people were treated very badly in South Africa, and expropriate without compensation is not an option. Now, the DA dismissed and voted against the act in Parliament. They also vowed to fight tooth and nail to prevent the land expropriation without compensation. So there's been a rift between the ANC and DA in government of national unity in this regard. But now the DA seems to be supporting and defending the logic behind the act. So in a way, they agree to disagree, but they now trying to look at ways and means of bowing down to the serious impact of the Expropriation Act. Asgar, I had a chat before the break with you, and there seems to be some kind of a misunderstanding about the Expropriation Act. Perhaps you can just briefly advise our listeners your understanding of the Act and which areas of land the government intends to expropriate, because one of the sort of areas in the Constitution is that the government will not expropriate land unnecessarily or without due regard to the use of the land and compensation thereof.
No, I think shukran for that. The thorough introduction on the matter. I think what must be understood is that land expropriation has been a thing in South Africa since the days of apartheid. So in apartheid, they may have used the Land Expropriation Act of 75 to justify and to perpetuate the Group Areas Act. The new constitution that was adopted in 1996, Section 25, made provision for land expropriation. But what is land expropriation? And it's not a wholesale, taking of land from the rightful owners. But we must look at it from an Islamic perspective. People were dispossessed of land previously through colonization, through colonial powers, through these unjust laws in the apartheid system. So from an Islamic perspective, as a Muslim, as a public representative, as a member of the Jama, we view it as a way of saying, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he mentions in the Quran, Inna Allah ya'mur bil adli wal ihsan. So first is justice. So the restoration of justice is something that is very, very important. and the land expropriation from an Islamic point of view, we look at justice as a central principle. So we believe that this land reform is particularly through the expropriation, well, now it's an act, is a step towards rectifying the historical injustices that took place in South Africa. There's in Islam we have this concept of being just, and we also have the concept of equity and fair distribution of wealth and property. The second thing is to restore the rights of others. So we believe that the Expropriation Act is a mechanism to restore the rights of those who were displaced, including those who were living on farm dwellers and indigenous communities, even in places such as Overport and Musgrave, where we had large number of Indians living, and then they were displaced to areas like Chatsworth. So I think the other issue that we need to understand is that this expropriation bill, how will it affect us, the layman on the street? Promoting economic justice, for example. Land reform is not only about redistribution and taking land and giving it to people and saying, okay, this belongs to you, but it's also to promote economic activity amongst those who were previously disadvantaged and those who were previously left out and excluded from the economic activity of the country. Then you look at the bill itself, or the act itself, there's 4 key features. And the expropriation bill, the first feature is that public interest. So the expropriation bill must serve, or the expropriation of land must be for the service of public interest. So which includes land distribution, infrastructure, housing projects. For example, if there's a piece of land somewhere that is not being used, then the government has the right, through the process, of course, which is outlined in the Act, to expropriate that land to ensure that people have dignified housing. The second thing is that the bill, and this was a very contentious issue. We know that the EFF, when the bill was introduced, were hard pressed and say, no, land expropriation without compensation. We as a political organization said no, that there must be reparations paid. So it's land expropriation with reparations, but the act, the way it's worded, will make a mention of land expropriation with nil compensation. So there is an opportunity to negotiate, but if the government is seeing that you are being unreasonable, the government has the right to give you nil compensation. So it's not no compensation where the EFF said blanket no compensation, but there is this latitude within the act to negotiate. So you can expropriate, but there will be some compensation for it, and it's not just any land that will be expropriated. Certain land, such as abandoned land or land not used productively, those type of lands will be expropriated. So the third key feature is that due process. The bill guarantees, or the act now guarantees, landowners to have the right to challenge the expropriation in court and also negotiate the terms. So if the government wants to expropriate this land, the landowner has the right to say, okay, you can take this, but give me something on that side. The government, there is that latitude to negotiate the terms. And the last, the key factors is that, or the key features rather, is that promotion of land reform. So this act is not a way of what's happened in Zimbabwe. So you just take away everything from the white man or from the farmer, but it's seen as a tool to address the imbalances of the past and the legacy of apartheid, where a disproportionate amount of land was in the hands of a minority. So this act is a tool to redress those imbalances of the past and promote land reform. And I think as Muslims, we must understand that the Sharia places great emphasis on the rights of a person. So if a person was harmed previously, then there must be justice, and those people need to be then compensated or then be given their haqq and their right. So in Islam, property ownership, we regard it as sacred. It's protected by the law. One of the maqasid of the Sharia is to protect your wealth and your family and all those type of things. So the Quran emphasizes that the ownership of land is a trust from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And those who are allowed to possess the property, but they must be conscious of the rights of others. So, and the social responsibilities. So what we need to understand is that even in Islam, if there's a social good linked to it, then it will be promoted. So there must be some, in public need, what we say, maslaha. So there must be some public need. Expropriation then becomes permissible with all the other conditions, of course. There must be, no unjust enrichment of any person. And this act is, when we went into government and we went into being public representatives in the corridors of power, one of our goals and objectives was to say, we may not see the country as a Muslim country or a country run by the Sharia laws, but we need to Islamatize the laws and to give it the laws an Islamic influence. So we see in these type of laws where that there's no unjust enrichment and those type of things, where it's Islamatized to say that it has an influence of Islam in it. So that is the basic understanding. It's not going to be a wholesale like what Donald Trump is alluding to, and some right wingers.
Very important comments you made and brought clarity to those that misunderstood the rationale for this particular act. And I think the fourth point you mentioned was the fact that it is once again redressing the imbalances of the past, because it's no doubt clear that some of our wealthy landowners, over decades have, acquired this land at a reasonable cost, either for farming or other purposes, and they're disposing the land now at high cost, and it's becoming unaffordable. And the fact that government now has got a huge challenge to provide services and housing opportunities to the communities, because there's a large amount of informal settlements throughout the country, and those individuals are now demanding, proper housing. And if there's no land, you can't. And I know I was in that sector many, many years ago, and because of the lack of, appropriate land for human settlement development, and expropriating that or trying to negotiate the purchase of that land, it comes at a huge cost. I know when we were negotiating the housing development in Konubia, and a large amount of money had to be spent in buying the land from Tongat Hewlett, and the cost became quite phenomenal, and a lot of government resources had to go in there. And if you go back to the pre-apartheid era, a lot of this land was given to those individuals at very reduced rates, and they're owning large tracts of land throughout the country. So in a way, this is trying to address the imbalances of the past. Hassan, I want to bring you in. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to News in Focus once again.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Now, Hassan, you've heard, Trump making this comment, and he's saying that he would stop providing funding to South Africa because he was worried that newly passed act would lead to land seizure.
Sure.
And Councillor Asgar Khan clearly mentioned that this act is intended to redress the imbalances of the past, and not everybody's land. For example, if you got 2 vacant pieces of land plus a house, you're not going to come for that because, you just got a small tract of land. But where, individuals are owning large tracts of land that is undeveloped and being unused, and it's ideal for human settlement development, they will be targeting those type of large tracts of land owned by the apartheid era individuals. So from a financial perspective, obviously, those individuals may lose off, but it's basically giving back to the government and providing opportunities for the poorest of the poor.
Sure. I mean, what's very interesting, if you look at Trump's all of a sudden he's been talking a lot about, tariffs and trade wars with major countries being China, Canada, Mexico being these big trading partners. And then you wonder why, out of the blue, he's speaking on a small country like us, miles away, thousands of miles away from the United States. And then it sort of dawns, his right-hand man these days being an ex-South African, being Elon Musk. And Elon Musk is driving an agenda around around protection of the minority across the globe. He's obviously funded hugely in terms of America, funding Trump's campaign in the elections, and now holds quite a powerful position in the Trump administration. But also importantly, you see him funding huge amounts of capital and money towards right-wing and far right-wing what you call as parties in the UK, in Germany, and don't be surprised that we see over the next few years in South Africa as well. Now, coming to this point around his issues around this expropriation and the cutting off of funding. From a South African perspective, how big an impact is the US in terms of being a funder of many of our projects and many what you call as economic activities in South Africa? If you look at the key area in terms of US funding relates to AIDS, HIV/AIDS. The US government in 2024 funded a total of around plus minus $400 million towards various South African projects. And a big part of that went towards the AIDS funding. If you look at what Minister Motala had indicated, I think a few days back, when he talked about how much was the overall funding of AIDS in South Africa, the antiretroviral program and the like, it is close to 60 billion rands. He indicated plus minus 17-18% of that comes from US funding. So to put it into perspective, it is around about, we could say it's about 10 billion rands or somewhere around that level there. So it's a significant amount, but largely towards the AIDS program. So if the US had to cut that immediately, there will be an impact in terms of the AIDS program in South Africa. That's where the major impact would be. And if you look in the last 15 years, Alhamdulillah, the ARV program that has been rolled out has had a positive impact in terms of South Africans. The death rate has reduced in that area, and the longevity of people that's suffering with AIDS has increased over a period of time. So there has been a positive impact in terms of that program, and it has benefited thousands of South Africans over the last 15 years in particular. So I think the key risk remains around that program. However, if you're looking at across the various projects and it's sort of the funding from the US in terms of to our country is very limited. Where an area where I think it's potentially a concern going forward is on the trading front. And that's where, for me, there's still a key risk that remains. Now, South Africa is still a big trading partner with the US. And to put it into perspective, South Africa exports close to 62 billion rands to the US in terms of goods and services, particularly our motor vehicles and the like. We do export a significant under the AGOA program. And if you look at what happened with Biden administration, that was extended for another year. So after, obviously, at the end of this year, that comes up again for renewal, there's a risk that program gets put under pressure and under threat. So we do export things like motor vehicles and some of our minerals, be it platinum or coal and the like. We do export it to countries, and US is being one of the countries that benefit. That is where the key risk is. If you look at what Trump announced in the weekend, he announced 25% import tariffs on all goods and quite a few goods and services coming from Canada and Mexico. Now, he had calls with the Mexican president and the Canadian president in the last few days, and they've now said that this will be withheld for 30 days, and then there will be a decision done after that. So I think they're working out, obviously, some trade deals. Trump, everything is about a deal and wants to get a deal done. So there will be, over the next 30 days, some deal that may come out of it, and then they may decide whether to still implement that 25. But China is where the big risk is. He's already implemented 10% tariffs on many Chinese goods being imported. It's close to $400 billion worth of goods that are coming into America from China that's being levied now with this 10% tariff. China, in return, has levied on US exports of coal and other goods to the value of about $25 to $30 billion. So it's going to be a tit for tat, game that's going on. Again, the Chinese premier and Trump is expected to have a call within the next few days, and we'll see what the potential outcome. Again, as I said, Trump loves a deal and he wants to do deals. So he may again negotiate in America's favor, or try to negotiate in America's favor a potential deal that where probably both sides will have some outcome, but more in favor of America as well. So I think the way he came out and said we're cutting, South Africa is doing bad things. What bad things? Please prove to us and tell us exactly what bad things that we are taking away land without compensation. For a moment there, when he was talking about that, I thought, is he talking about Israel or is he talking about South Africa? Because everything he said in his words so aptly applies to what Israel's been doing for the last number of decades. So I was just confused, because considering that Israeli Prime Minister is currently sitting there as well. But again, highlighting the point, he obviously comes out, shoots from the hip, and he tries to drive an agenda. My point is, I don't think that the funding perspective we should be majorly concerned. Yes, just on particularly the HIV side, but I think on the rest of it, less so. The key risk that we need to monitor and manage it well remains around the trade-related activities. And there, if there's any major import tariffs that are levied against South African goods and services to America, we are at risk. One other point just to highlight around this, and why I think he may be also putting, besides the fact that we've also been very vocal around the Palestinian cause and the Palestinians' human rights, what's happening in Gaza and the genocide there. I think the other point is, bearing in mind, South Africa is also hosting the G20 summit in November this year. And it will be handed over to the Americans for 2026. Now, again, South Africa would like to have the American president attending the G20 summit in November, because again, it's about power and prestige. And if South Africa hosts a successful G20 summit in November, it will bode very well for our country in terms of trade and economic activity that could potentially come out of that summit as well. Now, by doing these type of things, that he again leverages his position, and he tries to obviously gain favor and do deals in their favor.
I think, Hassan, just to add to what you were saying, dear leader John Steenhuisen stressed that US has been a long-standing and valued partner to South Africa. Therefore, they cannot afford to lose the funding. Now, according to Steenhuisen, in 2024 alone, South Africa received 8.5 billion, which is 453 million rand in direct funding under the PEPLA program, with a projected 8.2 billion, 439 million rand allocated for 2025. He says this funding is vital to sustaining life-saving HIV/AIDS treatment and support services for the most vulnerable members of our society. Further, and I think this is very important, that in addition, millions of US dollars flow into South African NGOs and government departments for humanitarian and environmental programs that directly benefit the most vulnerable communities. So it would be a tragedy if this funding were terminated because of a misunderstanding of the facts. Now, the GNU is in the process of engaging the Trump administration to clarify the situation, and the DA supports those efforts, he said. So obviously, it's a wake-up call for the country that be careful that do not impinge on the rights of the minorities, and understand that, rightfully or wrongfully, the US is providing a lot of support to South Africa, and we need to ensure that the interest of the minorities is taken into account. And this is why, when we were talking about post-service delivery and, there are serious problems, maladministration and corruption has to be dealt with. Tomorrow's SONA program, the president is facing some serious considerations and challenges that he needs to address. And amongst those things is what I mentioned, is the issue of dealing with crime, dealing with corruption, sort of giving feedback on the performance of the GNU, dealing with water outages, electricity outages, because all these kind of initiatives will impact on our economic situation in South Africa. Perhaps you want to comment on the likely areas that President Ramaphosa are going to, focus on in tomorrow's SONA speech,
Sure.
Hassan?
I think a couple of the key areas. I think obviously with what's happened with the U.S. and president's announcement, and bearing in mind that remember 2024 there was a number of elections that had taken place across the globe. So it is not only South Africa. You had America. You had there's a new UK Prime Minister. So there was various elections that had taken place across the globe, and so international relations is high on the agenda in terms of South Africa. So I think there will definitely be within this speech, a part of it being allocated towards South Africa projecting itself and maintaining good relations would across various parties and countries across the globe, but stressing the point that South Africa is a sovereign state and has the right to deal and support various causes which it sees appropriate. For example, the taking the Israel to the ICJ and lobbying launching the genocide case against them as well. I think the second key area, which is a big focus area, is around economic growth. I think he's gonna highlight that. He's gonna focus on highlighting the point that yes, while we had this load shedding, out of the blue that came and hit us on Friday evening and Saturday as well, I think he's going to focus on highlighting the point that we need to ensure that key utilities across the country need to be functioning properly, and that needs to enable economic growth in South Africa. So the fact that we've had a relatively stable electricity network over the past 10 months or so, barring what happened just on the weekend. But I think the focus is highlighting that the same must continue across the transport network and the infrastructure network. And that remains a big challenge. I think there will be some improvement on the transport side, particularly I think the ports and the railway. We could over the next 12, 18, 24 months see some improvement in that, which will help in terms of driving economic growth over the next few years. The key concern again around economy and the like is still around unemployment. He's going to touch on that again. He's going to touch on the fact that unemployment levels are still unsustainably high. And we need to drive economic growth and drive what you call unemployment lower by creating more and more jobs into this country. So I think that will be, again, part of the highlighted on the agenda, and he will try and give some key and pertinent facts around that as well. I think one area that still remains an issue, and I think unfortunately this the administration under Ramaphosa hasn't done much to address as yet, has been around corruption. So while there's a lot of noises and talk around, we reforming and we're trying to address it, there's still a huge amount of bad apples that are sitting across various state institutions, be it in national government, provincial government, or the municipalities across the country, that still remains in play. They are trying to, I think slowly they're making some progress, but it's a huge issue to address, and it's still, unfortunately, it's very systemic into the country. So that he will highlight it, and he'll talk about, but the reality is we haven't seen huge prosecutions and major victories in terms of people being prosecuted and then being thrown in jail and the keys are sort of thrown away. We haven't seen much of that, and we need to see more of that taking place in 2025 to get confidence and drive and people will feel confident. Hey, our government is doing something about corruption, and we're seeing the benefit of it now starting to come through. He will definitely touch it on the agenda on his speech, but I think people are still not convinced that we are seeing much of that as well. And I think lastly is obviously I think the area around crime. Crime still remains an issue, and I think we've seen it over the last 15 years or so. It has accelerated. Major areas where just yesterday we saw the cash in transit heist that was taking place towards Clearwood Mobile. I think it was towards Higginson Highway, around that side it happened as well. But what is important that happened after that? The police acted. And of the 4 people that were involved, one person was killed, and another was also shot and taken into police custody. 2 were still at large, which is highlighting the point that there is a bit more action and activity coming place in terms of the police force and the security agencies that are not security, not the intelligence. They seem to be not too active, but I'm talking about the private security firms that are working with the SSAPs and trying to sort of protect us. And I think that is slowly making some progress as well. So I think he will bring that also to the agenda as well.
Hassan, just to add to what you're saying, OTA's chief executive Wayne Devanaga said he expects Ramaphosa to address critical challenges with clear, actionable commitments. He said that while acknowledging the ongoing crises in water and electricity, OTA believes that tackling corruption should be at the forefront of Ramaphosa's agenda. Now, I want to stress that corruption has been acknowledged as a serious crisis that undermines service delivery, which we've been talking about, weakens governance and fuels inefficiency across sectors, including water and energy. These issues cannot be effectively resolved without addressing the systematic corruption and the demise of local government, whereby the poor service delivery from key national government institutions and many municipalities gives rise to heightened suffering and anxiety for millions of citizens. So it is abundantly clear that this issue of corruption and maladministration has to be taken headlong and dealt with appropriately at all levels, so that the monies that are actually, saved from these inefficiencies are used to improve service delivery. Because on the one side, South Africa is looking forward to aid from other countries, but on the other side, the monies are being squandered by maladministration and inefficient people working at a government level. So it moves the government backwards. Asgar, I want to bring you in here. We spoke about, Trump's reaction to the Expropriation Act. There are comments coming through indicating that on the one side, the Zionists have not only expropriated or sort of damaged property of the Gazans, but they've literally expropriated the land and moved them out to other areas. And then Trump had the audacity of announcing that USA is going to take over the land. Whether it's a joke or not, we don't know. Now, on the one side, he points out to South Africa that this is not on, and the other side, he's party to something that's worse than this. What's your comment?
No, I think one would understand that this annexation and colonization and I won't even call it expropriation, because expropriation is there to benefit the users or the residents of that area. But the stealing of land, blatant stealing of land, has been taking place since the 1940s, since the establishment of the apartheid Zionist state of Israel. Trump's comments, it was expected, because Trump, he's a populist politician. He wants to work on the popularity of what is happening in his society, and he wants to ensure that he remains popular within the American people.
Is he trying to please Netanyahu or Israel, or is he just pulling a bluff on them?
No, I think Trump comes out with
he can't just simply say that I'm going to take over the land, do development, and you guys that are living in the sea or other places, you stay there, or other countries take over. That's what he's suggesting, Egypt and others. And we're taking you out of your motherland, for which they fought and for which there's a ceasefire. So it's really stupid of him to make those comments. But, maybe people feel that it's a bluff. He wants to redevelop and replace the, livelihoods of the households and enable people to live, a decent life, but appease Netanyahu and say, we need to redress the damage we caused.
So I think the American governments over the last 20, 30 years has made it very clear that one of its priorities is ensuring that Israel is kept safe. So Trump's utterances, we must not take it lightly, because it is part of their plan to keep Israel safe, in inverted commas, so that if they feel that if we can control that port of entry.
What is he going to do with those Palestinians that are there still?
Well,
he's attempting to move them to other countries, but they're not going to move because even the kids are saying this is our land of birth. We're going to stay here, and we fought this war for 23 months or whatever the period is. Because this land belongs to us, and who gives you the right to come there and demand that you got your interest in the gas reserves there, you got your interest in the popularity of the land. And Trump himself said before the elections that he doesn't encourage war, he doesn't encourage stealing of land. He's targeting South Africa, on a trivial issue. But yeah, he's causing major turmoil in the statement he's making, and other governments are reacting to say this is not on.
Yeah, no, I think no sane government will actually support Trump in his endeavors to go ahead with these utterances regarding Gaza. But I think what the world has seen.
But in his backyard, he had these fires that devastated, and we know that he's realizing that there's Allah that controls the world. Maybe he doesn't. He's probably just sort of blinded by what's happening.
I posted on social media this morning a picture of Trump and Netanyahu when they met yesterday, and the caption was, "These are the shayateen ins." These are the shayateen in human form. And I think
after you posted that, don't apply for visa to USA.
I have no interest in visiting.
But listen, the reality is that Allah has made it abundantly clear that I'm in control by the fire that took place in USA and the damage it's caused. And in the Quran, there's clear ayats that talk about the impact of shaitan and those Hamans and Karuns that are existing in today's time. And this reaffirms the sacrifice and the struggle that the Palestinians have done in the last 24 months. So to make a blunt statement like that, it's not as easy as making the statement. And the fervent du'as of our martyrs that have gone and those that are still living, Allah is making them be patient to achieve the end result. So these kind of utterances that Fir'aun and Haman made, they were destroyed. So from an Islamic perspective, Asgar, we as Muslims, that we have yaqeen that, only shaitans will make these statements. And they are irresponsible statements. And you quoted, a few ayats relating to if land was grabbed in the past, how the imbalances can be addressed. So in terms of the issue of, the plea to USA not to withdraw funding, etc., that is more a materialistic plea. But in terms of Sharia, we're not bound by or become slaves of any, wealthy people as such.
No, I had this discussion with one of our colleagues within the party, and I said that we must be very clear that South Africa is not for sale. No matter what our policies are, we are a sovereign nation. The country will take decisions for itself, and America or the West must not dictate to South Africa as to the direction that South Africa should go. Yes, we as South African citizens residing in this country, we need to influence the government. We need to influence those who are in charge to go towards a system where we as Muslims will be proud, and we as Muslims will have a better grip on the society, so that, because Islam promotes a society which people prosper, a morally sober society. So we need to promote that, but we must make it clearly known to the West that South Africa is not for sale. If you want, it's only 17%. I'm sure if the Arab countries come together, we'll make 50% of our AIDS program. And if people, 15 years ago we said, when we were campaigning for elections, we said that South Africa in the next 20, 30 years, at that time we said 50 years, but now it's in the next 20 or 30 years, South Africa will be a society which has majority Muslims. So we asked, we're young, we said, how is this be possible? So the response that we received was many of the people are engaging in immoral acts, are suffering with AIDS, and they will soon die. So therefore, when they pass away, then the majority of the country will then be those who are morally sober. So if you look at this, it may be a blessing in disguise that people will be. It will be used as a stepping stone for a moral regeneration of society. And inshallah, the problems that we're experiencing, the problems of corruption and maladministration and all those type of things will then be sorted out, because then people have an understanding of the amana and the trust that is placed upon them in these different roles of government. Because as a Muslim, when I go into council, or when I go into parliament, or when I go into the provincial legislature, I have a trust placed upon me. Yes, the people place a trust upon me, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who is in control of that, He allowed those people to place the trust upon our shoulders. So it's a responsibility upon us, it's a trust, it's an amana upon us that we need to fulfill and deliver the trust back to the people.
Well, certainly. Hassan, I want to bring you in as your final comment. Sure. You're running out of time. Is Trump using this expropriation act and few other issues against South Africa as an excuse to target South Africa because of South Africa's role in the ICJ matter against Israel? Is that part of his agenda, or it's something else?
Look, I think it may be some possibility around that. With him, you never know whether it is. I think more so it is around Musk being his now his special advisor and sort of guiding him on many things. I think it's driven around a lot of also economic interests. Now remember, Musk is a billionaire that has various interests, whether it's Tesla, whether it's SpaceX, Starlink. There's various companies and sectors that he operates in. And the one that he's been spreading throughout Africa, or he's been trying to gain foothold, is around the telecommunication sector with Starlink. He's already in some of the neighboring countries. He's already implemented his satellite services in there. South Africa is a country he wants to get in around that there. And the thing that's annoying him, to use the word, is around the South Africa's requirement in that sector of having a 30% BE requirement. And he's been trying to oppose that, and he's been not happy about it. And that so far is his sticking point. And by asking the president of the United States to come out and say, you've got this expropriation, is the one thing, which is obviously driving again the minority agenda as well. But at the same time, it's saying, okay, well, your BE policies and the like are also not very favorable. And you're not encouraging activities or business investment from foreigners by having these type of things. Now, when you think about it, okay, well, he's talking about us having that. Look at TikTok. TikTok is a Chinese-owned company that's operating throughout the world. Trump comes in. TikTok now, the U.S. administration, the previous years was banning it because there was concerns around that the Chinese government is influencing and could gain access. It's from they said it's basically a protection around potential, what you call threats from the Chinese government and the like. However, what Trump said, no problem, we can do something around it, but you need to sell 50% of your business to an American company or American individual. So how's that now? A foreign company going into that's been operating there, has normally owned, now you're saying, no, to operate in this country, because you have some concerns, you have to have 50% local ownership. So nothing too dissimilar. And who is the potential beneficiary of that? Musk is one of the ones that's running as in the Musk, Mark Zuckerberg from Meta, Jeff Bezos. There's a few of them all of them that sat in the gallery just behind Trump in his inauguration speech 2 weeks ago. They're all vying to try and get a stake or buying the TikTok stake of 50% in the US. So it's not something that's unusual where South Africa says, look, to address the issues of the past. Yunus, you and I talked about earlier where we said that if you look 30 years into democracy, just over 30 years, close to 70 to 80% of the economy is still run by a minority. If you look at the listed companies on the JSE, if you look at Naspers or Prosus and the like, the big companies and the big mining companies like Glencore and the like, who is it owned by? Again, minorities. So you have to have some change and address it, but they must be done properly. It must be done with not this, tenderpreneurs and this person that because I'm connected to so and so. It must be done equitably. Whether you're coming from a black majority, but also what about the other minorities that were also disadvantaged, be it the Khaleds, the Indians, and the like? They also can participate and also benefit, but bringing the necessary skills, having the right skill set, the requirements and qualifications to try and do that. No, just because cadres and that, you do it properly and do it where everybody and the country itself benefits from it as well. So I think the less so in terms of, yes, there could be some element, the fact that South Africa is also being punished a bit because of what their stance was on Palestine and the driving force behind the ICJ case and the like. But I think it's more so around driving an agenda around economics, financial gain, and trying to ensure that the certain group of people still continue to thrive and benefit from what this country has to offer as well.
Thank you, Hassan. I just need to sum up because we ran out of time. I think we had quite a good discussion on some of the areas of service delivery and how to improve. And I think Asgar unpacked with us the Expropriation Act. It's not as bad as what's being propagated. And, Trump's comments and analysis of it and the financial perspective. On a closing note, we have to be positive and, make sure that whichever area we intervene on, it's for the benefit of the people of our country. And currently, the challenge we have is service delivery, and we have to make efforts towards improving service delivery. And in that way, we got to hold government, municipalities accountable. Ratepayer associations need to play a proactive role in meeting with heads of departments of municipalities and question them together with the councillors as to where the money is being used and why is there no service delivery. And that's one area we have to be proactive and be positive. But the other area is to prepare for change in political leadership, and which will then result in revamping administrations at a local government level. Because these people that are holding these positions, it's a position of amanat, and if there's not responsible administration, then you're going to get the scourge that we're talking about. Now, tomorrow's Sona Al-Ansar Media Network will be taking it live, so catch a listen carefully as to whether Ramaphosa is making once again promises or really intends to make it happen. On our side, the month of Ramadan is approaching. We are about 20 odd days away from it. Once again, it's a Mubarak month, and we have to turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for help. In South Africa, we are the minority, and through our du'as, as Asgar mentioned, we can change the condition of our government and the people around us. And we have to do humanitarian work with lots of poor people living around us, because if you look at the informal settlements and the townships, people are living in abject poverty, and it is a sunnah of Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam that you care for the disadvantaged, you care for the disabled, you care for those that are less fortunate than us. So this humanitarian effort around us becomes crucial, because deen is not just about making our ibadat and fasting in the month of Ramadan, etc. It's about this human touch that we need to perpetuate. So in that regard, there's a lot of efforts taking place by the different humanitarian organizations, and Al-Ansar Foundation is involved in various projects. So please join us to assist our people, in ensuring that the needs of our people are dealt with. And important is for us to do dawah amongst, because when Asgar was mentioning that, in maybe in a decade or two's time, that South Africa will have, majority Muslims, then I thought he was talking about converting our black brothers to Islam, away from, dealing with, idols and other worship, ideologies. And it must be crucial in our mind that, the Maidan is open for people to accept the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So dawah becomes an important instrument. And look at the fires in USA, where a lot of people realized the control of Allah of the world, and then began accepting Islam in large numbers. Even in Gaza, some of the IOF soldiers realized the power of Allah and accepted Islam. So we mustn't forget Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam. One of the key priorities during his time was to give dawah. So we cannot forget that message, and also we have to ensure that our amals are effective, that we perform our 5 times salah, we help the poor, and we also ensure that the needs of the people around us are taken care of. And in that way, Islam will be practiced amongst our non-Muslims, and they will look at our examples and accept Islam. So we have a crucial role to play as Muslims, and we must continue with this role and ensure that the needs of humanity is taken care of. On that note, we're 15 minutes over our time, and then that brings us to the end of News in Focus for this evening. I want to thank our guests, Councillor Asgar Khan, Hassan, Motala, and Dr. Rama Naidu that joined us this evening. We had quite a vibrant discussion, as always, in News in Focus. We will continue next Wednesday with our program. And in our program, I always include service delivery so that we can gauge whether there's an improvement or not. And this is in preparation for 2026. And it's important that we are positive about making changes, because we're residents of this country, and it's important that we contribute and make these changes. Until next Wednesday, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.